Being a community advocate is part of JJ Frank's DNA. JJ serves in the community where he was raised. In 2002, JJ started the innovative Minority Achievers Program, designed to motivate and support students of color and immigrants to achieve their educational and career goals. JJ, who is African American, also helped form the Communities of Color Coalition and is heavily involved with a cancer awareness educational program sponsored by Providence Regional Medical Center of Everett. He is also a prominent member of Black Men of Action. JJ was recently a guest on All the Way Authentic with Kevin P. Henry and Chayton Chopra. I'm your host, Kevin P. Henry, and this is All the Way Authentic. Our interview began with a question from Chayton Chopra.
So can you just tell me a little bit about your background growing up in Snohomish and how that has related to what your work doing now?
Yeah, I mean, just, on a brief side of it, my mother moved my brother and I from actually Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, when I was 3 and my brother was 2. We moved all the way across the country to Everett, Washington. And that's a whole nother story on how we got here to Everett. But I'm a K through 12 graduate in the Everett School District, and really wanted to continue playing my football dreams. And I walked on to the University of Washington and played on back-to-back Rose Bowl teams when we beat Iowa. And then we beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl for the national championship. That's when Desmond Howard played. But realized I wasn't going to go to the NFL and, needed to get my degree. And I came back to my community in 1995 and started doing gang intervention, getting kids off the streets, back into school. Did that for a while. We had a contract with the police department in the city of Everett for a few years, and then started working at the YMCA in 1998. And I've been here ever since. Now, I'm not representing the Y in this capacity. Really wanted to talk more specifically about my community advocacy and how we've started various things here in Snohomish County, like the Communities of Color Coalition. We started the Students of Color Conference, and I was very instrumental in being really a part of that when we first started those initiatives.
For sure, yeah. And are there any other things that you're involved with in the community that we'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, specifically from my employment job, we started the Minority Achievers Program, which specifically focuses on supporting students of color and immigrant students to graduate from high school and go to college. And that's been very successful. That still goes on within the YMCA. And obviously, a lot of my community work has been under that umbrella. But I think some of the topics that maybe we might cover today, I really want to focus on how I show up as a Black man in the community and how I empower community and youth, particularly Black youth, students of color, to really be advocates on promoting change in their community.
Well, let me jump into with a question, because you mentioned the student conference, Students of Color Conference, and I attended, I believe it was last year, and sat on a panel, and it was a great event because it was almost all day, and I don't know, several hundred students from different schools came in, and I sat on a panel that had to do with media and journalism, but there were all these other panels. So why is that so instrumental? Because sometimes, we're living in this climate today where there's so much adversity, let's just say, when it comes to trying to help communities of color. It's downplayed. It's like, why do we have to spend money on this? And why is it important? And that kind of thing. But maybe you could go into how, as a Black man and as a, older Black man, how you can help youth kind of get on the right track.
Right. Yeah. And, my whole career has really been based on that. I mean, I remember when I was coming out of college and I seen so many kids out on the streets, and that was so much different than when I grew up in the city of Everett. I mean, we were playing games. We were going to the Boys and Girls Club in North Everett, and we played a lot outside. I mean, we weren't hanging out in the streets, getting involved with gangs or criminal activity. And so I took initiative to kind of find out why these kids were out there. I used to go inside the juvenile facilities and talk to them while they were incarcerated. And so we started this program called this gang intervention program, where we really were trying to get kids off the streets. And with my background, I felt like these students needed to be in school. Like, if we get them off the street, we need to get them back in school or look at some type of employment. When I went over to work with the YMCA, and obviously my focus has always been education. I started the Communities of Color Coalition with some other folks. I want to say Ed Glazier and a couple other folks were instrumental with that. But that particular focus was, how do we empower young people, to really focus on education and then interacting with other people of color who were professionals in the community. And I remember when we did that conference, it was like 20 to 30 kids at Everett Community College. And I don't know how many people were there the last time you went, Kevin, but it's like thousands of kids that come across the county. And the reason why we did that is students of color graduate at a lower rate than our white students, and they don't go to college at the same rate as the white students. So we were trying to be deliberate and intentional, because a lot of people are like, well, why are you focusing on students of color? And I said, well, because they're less likely to, not only graduate, but less likely to transition into either a community college or a university. And so we doubled down on that. And they were doing this in different parts of the country. We were just kind of slow in Snohomish County. They were doing it in King County. And we started doing that. And now it's thousands of kids being empowered by mentors or professionals of color to say, hey, you could be the next Kevin Henry. And here, let's talk to them and interact with them and go to their place of business. And so that's really how we focused on students of color, to let them know that there's careers beyond high school.
You are listening to an interview with J.J. Frank, conducted by Kevin P. Henry and Chayton Chopra. This is all the way authentic. Well, and the thing that strikes me, and I think it's so important to spend time with a mentor and to do job shadowing and things like that, is because I've done a lot of career fairs and career days and career panels over the years with high school students. And a lot of them would have goals and dreams like, oh, I want to be an FBI agent. Oh, I want to be a lawyer. I remember one young lady who we were kind of doing orientation with this group of high school students in Bellevue. And this is quite a while ago, but I said, so what do you want to do? She says, well, I want to be a lawyer. And I said, well, why is that? She said, because I watched this certain TV show that was on at the time, and the lawyer wears really nice clothes, and the lawyer, does this, and the lawyer makes $300 an hour. I said, yeah, that all sounds good. I said, but I'm going to bring in a judge and an attorney to talk to you and really explain what goes beyond what you just see on TV. And by the time they got through talking to her, she said, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. Because what she wasn't aware of was law school, taking the bar, possibly failing the bar, taking the bar again, not going to parties, not having a social life because you're in the library until 3 o'clock in the morning and studying. And for whatever they would see in the courtroom, like the attorney kind of strutting around, that was 10% of what the attorney had to do. You don't see them studying case law until 4 a.m, meeting with clients, dealing with real volatile situations. I think she decided to do something that was more, aligned with her skills, but I think really painting that accurate picture of what a career is about. And I think you can only do that by spending time with someone like you or job shadowing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you kind of touched on it perfectly, is it's more than just mentoring, but it's when you do the career exploration and you really understand what kind of educational background, what are the skill competencies that you need, then some of these students start looking at different careers, or they stay down that path. But our goal, and it wasn't, my mentor was a white male. His name's Ray Severs. And he was a big part of my life. His wife was my third grade teacher, and I was having some problems in high school and got kicked off the team for drinking. And he came in when I was 17 years old, and he really helped me. and mentored me in my life. And so, you don't have to be a person of color to mentor a student of color, but we were really focusing on getting more professionals of color so these students could see themselves in some of the professionals that they were connecting with, and then when they did the career exploration. So, but we do try to recruit all volunteers who are willing to spend time with students.
Well, I think you touched on something very important in that I think you can have a great mentor from any racial background. I do think, though, as I think you agree, that if you can find someone who looks like you, especially in a field that's not known to have people of color, and there's certain fields out there that where if you see a black doctor in a certain part of the country, or you see a biologist or whatever, it might be very rare, just like it is women in certain professions. But I remember when I was a kid. I remember I couldn't figure out why my parents, every time there was a Sidney Poitier movie out in the 60s and the 70s, we had to go see it.
Right.
And I'm a kid. Why are we going to see the, Sidney Poitier, Lilies of the Field, To Serve with Love, what, Raisin in the Sun? Why am I, And then I realized later on it's because that was about the only black actor you could see that wasn't playing a stereotype.
Right.
And later, of course, you had, Bill Cosby and other actors, but it's so important to see yourself. And anytime you want to jump in, by the way, Chayton, with a question, feel free. I did want to move. Did you have a question now? Because then I was going to move to another project, JJ's.
Not for right now.
Okay.
I think I completely agree. I think seeing people who look like you in like careers that you want to do is like very empowering. And I think definitely doesn't happen enough. I think definitely in public schools where people are coming in and like sharing their career and sharing what they really do. And I think that leads to a lot of people like just their dream is to be like an athlete or like something like that, or like an actor. Then it doesn't really work out for them, and then they don't really have someone to empower them to do something that would maybe benefit their community, like being a lawyer or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you touched on something wonderfully, Chayton, about giving back to community in the capacity of like being an attorney or being even a police officer, because even there it's important to have more attorneys of color, more attorneys or more journalists of color,
Mm-hmm.
and police officers of color, because building that trust and that relationship is, I think, key. And that's where I do think that when you have commonalities along racial lines, that can be, or even sexual orientation, what have you, can be so instrumental. I wanted to move over to the I guess it's the Providence Regional Cancer
Mm-hmm.
Project. A couple weeks ago, I had the honor of being with about, I don't know, 12 or 13 other black male professionals. And one of the goals of this project was to really encourage men to get screened, to be proactive in their health, because when it comes to health disparities, people of color can be disproportionately affected by things like cancer and things like that. So why don't you tell me more about that, JJ?
Yeah, and as you know, that was a spinoff of the Breakfast. We were reaching out to black men to empower black men to find out ways that we can support each other. And I think the word got out in the community that we were doing that event at WSU at the Everett branch, Washington State University, and Chanel Amos came to that event and said, "Look, I have some." Strategies and initiatives from Providence Swedish Hospital to really focus on black men and do some awareness campaigns, and particularly with the colon cancer. And she said, would you be willing to try to reach out to black men so we could raise awareness, because it is curable, it is preventable if you get the early screenings. And when I pitched it to some of the black men, they said absolutely, and they came at 7 a.m. in the morning. So they're going to be doing a promotional video with that particular promo pictures, and they kind of videotaped us talking about how we can encourage Black men to get their screening. And one of the things I wanted to go a little deeper with Chanel Amos was, and Providence was like, let's not stop at just colon cancer. Let's talk about prostate cancer. Let's talk about diabetes, because that also affects Black men at a disproportionate rate. And so I think this whole health and wellness piece, mentoring young students, particularly Black students, and getting them connected with other Black role models. I think there's some, it's getting some traction, and I think it's going to take some root here in Snohomish County for us to really empower Black men to connect with young Black men and go out there and focus on our students of color, especially in the climate that we're in right now. I think this is the time that we double down to really make sure that students feel empowered and supported, and that they know that people care about them and see them and want to help develop them.
Yeah, that health thing is is so important. I mean, my father died of colon cancer at 78, and I remember because I was living in Seattle, my parents were living in LA, and I remember, my dad's in the hospital, we're talking. I was real close with my parents, and he was saying it was a while before he even went to the doctor. He said, there were times when I was sick and I could hardly drive home from work, and I'm saying, why didn't you get screened? Why didn't you? And there's this real, not all males, of course, but there's this real aversion to going to the doctor,
Right.
tough it out. And so many times, pardon me, so many times I've heard from people who were third or fourth stage cancer, and the doctor says, well, how long have you been having these symptoms? Oh, a year.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it could be cured, or even preventable, when it comes to even like things like diet and stress
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah, so true. And like, I got some great advice from a retired doctor, and I was having some issues with my blood pressure, and always has. And a lot of things we got to understand, especially with Black men, is a lot of these progressive diseases can be hereditary.
Mhm.
And that, it's not that you're not trying to eat better or to move and be healthier in terms of your exercise, but it's okay to take high blood pressure medicine or cholesterol medicine. And I know a lot of people don't promote pills, but like one of the things that really resonated with me with this retired doctor, he says, JJ, we need you here, and your family needs you here. And you have to understand what comes with high blood pressure is a stroke or a heart attack, and you can die from it. It's a silent killer. And I strongly encourage you to get an internal medicine doctor. And I got an internal medicine doctor about 10 years ago. And I know my numbers, Kevin. I know my cholesterol numbers. I know my, all my numbers, my ARC numbers. I know my numbers because I do my blood work 2 times a year, and we discuss that with my internal medicine doctor. And I would really encourage, particularly Black men and men of color, we have to know our numbers, because that's the way you do preventative medicine. And I'm on blood pressure medicine because I do have high blood pressure, and I want to be around to see my grandkids one day, maybe, Lord willing. And I want to be here to celebrate my kids maybe getting married one day. And so we just really have to do self-care and focus on our health. I think sometimes we kick that down the road, and sometimes it can be deadly.
Yep. Now,
I think,
go ahead, Chase.
yeah. One question I have, I think there's a huge stigma, particularly in the Black community and people of color, around going to the doctor. I feel like just because historically, like we know, like the Tuskegee experiments and stuff like that, and like vaccines being experimented on people of color, I think there's like a huge stigma around going to the doctor. So what are some ways that we can like help make that not as big of a deal and help big people understand that going to the doctor can be a positive experience instead of maybe a negative one that they've experienced in the past?
Yeah, and I think it came with that, like that. We had this, we called it Black Men in Action, and we had various topics, and one of them was around health and wellness. And I think just us getting comfortable with talking to each other and supporting each other and saying, hey, do you know your numbers? And if you don't, hey, this is the way you do it, and really start walking people through. Because that retired doctor, I didn't even know that there were internal medicine doctors. I didn't, I didn't even have a personal doctor. I would just go in the clinic, the walk-in clinic, if something was wrong with me. But I do think more support groups to walk people through it. For example, that's what I'll be following up with Chanel Amos on is how do we walk people through if I want to get if a black man is over 40 years old and he hasn't had any screenings, what's the first step to that? Like, how do they set up an appointment? How do they work with their provider to get that done? And I think we just take it for granted that people know how to do that. And I think a lot of people don't. And I think if black men have done their screening, I just had my last screening, I don't know, a couple months ago. So I think it will bring more comfort to people who have actually done it. So it gives them some confidence to walk other men of color through that process. Because it's not, a lot of people have these stereotypical views of it, but it's important for us to do self-care and focus and put our health as a priority. And I think a lot of times, particularly men of color and black men, usually put that on the back burner.
And I think normalizing the conversation so that it's not something that, I don't want to talk about this or I don't want to know anyone. And I think normalizing it comes with having people around you talking about the same thing, because then it's like, oh, hey, Chayton and JJ don't have a problem talking about it, and a lot of people keep things to themselves.
Yeah.
But if they hear other people talking about it, then it's like it tends to break down those self-imposed barriers that they might have put on themselves. I want to end it here, but I want to give you a chance to say anything any last thoughts or that you'd like to express, Mr. JJ.
Yeah, and is it Chayton? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Chayton. Mm-hmm.
Chayton.
And Kevin, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think it's conversations like this that start us on our journey. Like, let's say if we took this particular podcast conversation and focused around health and wellness and how do we empower more black men and men of color to actually know their numbers and to get their screenings and doing preventative work, I think that'd be awesome. I think we have to continue this conversation. I'm excited because I love what I do through the YMCA, but I also love what I do as a black man and empowering community, empowering students. So I'm so happy to see you today, Chayton, and thank you for this opportunity for me to hear it from your lens, because you don't look at society like I do. I have experiences that are different. I'm 54 years old. I don't know if I got more days behind me than I do ahead of me, but I feel like you got more days ahead of you. And so I want to partner with you. I want to work with students, community, and other individuals like Kevin to really work together to make our community stronger and healthier. So this is a beginning of a conversation, and I'm just kind of looking for the next one. So thank you for the opportunity for us to sit down and talk with each other.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of All the Way Authentic with our guest, JJ Frank, hosted by Kevin P. Henry and Chayton Chopra. This is Kevin P. Henry for All the Way Authentic.